Well, right across the country, Australians have watched on with disbelief at what's been happening in Victoria. The hundreds of lives lost when the rest of the nation has all but beaten this virus. The multi-billion-dollar economic hit. Businesses that will never recover, jobs that just won't come back, and a city of 5.5 million people in a lockdown that's officially today now the longest and hardest lockdown in the world, longer than even Wuhan. All because of a state government that's incompetent and a premier with a messiah complex that's traded leadership for panic. One man who could not watch on and stay silent any longer is a man I'm going to introduce to you now, an economist with the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance. Mr. Sanjeev Sabhlok posted his honest thoughts on social media. He was then asked by Treasury to remove them. Instead, he resigned. Now, former economist with the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance, Mr. Sanjeev Sabhlok, joins me now from Melbourne. Sanjeev, welcome to the show. You've done something that almost no one ever does these days. You've resigned from the Victorian Public Service as a matter of honour, because the public service, you believe, was no longer providing the best professional advice and was trying to limit your freedom of speech. Briefly tell us what drove you to speak out.
Peter, the situation started pretty badly all over Australia and I think all over the Western world when you consider that there was the literature, the scientific literature had always said that there shouldn't be such lockdowns. The World Health Organization's own report had said that in 2019. I think we all copied Wuhan in a bit of a panic, and that could be sort of excused to some extent. But then immediately after that, I think my concern, I actually raised the matter even in February with my department senior officials requesting for an age-based, risk-based approach to this particular pandemic. And I believe the data was sufficient at that stage for us to start looking at it in terms of actions to isolate the elderly, to protect them so that we have very few casualties and deaths, and also the ones with comorbidities, but also to let the rest of the world, rest of the society continue with precautions. And I was an advocate of masks from the beginning. The situation was that within the department, I was told basically that this is not really the department's job. This is the DHHS, which is the health department's job. Mm-hmm. They obviously have the expertise. And our job was, I really couldn't understand what our job would be in this case, because normally Treasury actually provides a holistic advice. And that's the whole point of these central agencies, that we consider all the line agencies' input from line agencies and then provide the wide-ranging analysis of the impacts across the board in the future and so on. And that's the whole point of economics. So it looks like that wasn't happening, and I think a number of us internally were raising the matter. I was not the only one concerned, let me just say that. But we were essentially not heard. And this went on till finally it became very personal. I think that it became personal when, as I mentioned, I'm a mask fanatic. Actually, I wear a mask when I go to shops. I was wearing it from the month of February onwards, okay? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then the problem was that when they make it mandatory in the outdoor spaces, to me, that was an extreme overreach. We've started reaching from one heavy-handed approach to the more heavy-handed approaches. And that also meant the curfew.
Yeah, let me just jump in there, because the point you make about the role of a central agency, for people who are not familiar with the public service, what you're saying there is working inside Treasury, which is where all the economic brain power of our public service is. You are supposed to be reviewing decisions right across other portfolios. That's certainly the case of my 16 years experience in Canberra. Clearly that's not happening in Victoria. I want to go to something you wrote today about the Victorian Guide to Regulations that states it's not possible to provide a completely risk-free society. Now, was there any risk analysis done by the Victorian government before these lockdowns were imposed? We know, for example, it's all been revealed that the curfew is not there because of health advice. It's not there because of police advice. I've got to ask you, how much of this failed strategy is actually coming out of the Premier's political office now?
Look, I'm a free citizen now, and I can speak freely about my concerns about the way this has been done, and I suspect it's happening from the very top. And that's why I joined the protest to actually, I never have in my whole life protested anything, but I have finally joined a protest to actually ask Mr. Daniel Andrews that, look, you either reset the policies of Victoria based on the guidance and requirements of Victoria itself. It's not something outside Victoria's remit. And either you do that or you leave. So I suspect what you're saying has got some truth in it, that it could be potentially coming right from the very top. And I suspect here that's where I believe the public service has not performed its role in terms of being an independent and free and fearless source of analysis, which provides the government with a wide range of impacts of different things. And if that was done, and even then the government continued with these actions, then the responsibility is purely that of the government. But I also suspect, Peter, that and that's a concern that I raised also, and I believe it's a matter for governance reforms, that the contractual arrangements of the public servants at the top might make them at the very margin, as I'm speaking as an economist, make them a bit biased towards supporting the status quo rather than rocking the boat if it involves putting in advice that might not be welcome by the political masters. But then the whole point is that we have wasted the taxpayers' money, and we might as well have ministerial advisors in place. There is no need to have people like me.
Let's just jump in there too, because I thought something you said today was very powerful, that Australia is signalling to the world that it's closed for business and doesn't care for human freedoms. And you say that this will really dampen business investment and impact a whole lot of other things, education, tourism, industry, and all of those sorts of things. Now, we know from business they are on their knees in Victoria, incredibly angry. Do you think in all of this that we're not seeing the wood for the trees?
That's the whole point I've been making, right? The whole point about having a central agency is to provide the holistic impact. And in this case, we're always seeing is we must keep the numbers of the cases, and that's not just the death. Some cases must fall below a particular number, pulled out of the hat. There is no basis to say that that's the actual number, which is so-called viable with the long-term future of Victoria. I think this whole thing has been a policy on the run and is one of the worst examples of policy making in my entire life. I've been a public servant, by the way, for 38 years, of which half was in India and half here. So, yeah, I think this whole thing, they're just over-focusing on one item. But society, as we know, has got a wide range of issues involved, wide range of health impacts, economic impacts, psychological well-being, the sense of ownership that you can actually go out and do your own things. The fact that businesses, I believe, have the capacity, if you tell them that these are the risks, they have the capacity to innovate and to create options and solutions for their own environment because they want to please the customers. They want to make sure customers will come to them and not get infected. So I believe this is what Richard Epstein has been pointing out, and many economists have pointed out, that we should trust the people of Victoria and Australia rather than having centralized decision-making. And this, by the way, is the extreme form of communism you can imagine, where the entire decision-making of every single activity in the state is, in fact, if you look at the orders that have come out saying, thou shalt have, every industry has been marked, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. Look, that's actually what is called communism. It's communism in practice, okay? This is where communism always fails, because it does not look into the local information, the knowledge that is as high emphasized is found only among the people themselves and their circumstances.
And look, we've seen that the level of fines in Victoria. We've seen how hard the lockdown is. We've seen these now the so-called ring of steel police, cordons outside of Melbourne. You said very powerfully today, good policy processes don't disappear just because we face an urgent health crisis. In fact, good policy becomes even more important. I've got to ask you, and I agree with you there, that's when the public service should be absolutely at the table, and that you don't cede power to government, to the politicians. It's incredibly important we maintain our democratic institutions. Look, the Parliament's not sitting, as we know. Has the Victorian Public Service not spoken its mind, not given enough frank and fearless advice? You've been there, you've been in the meetings, you've been on the email trail. Tell us
I've been stifled.
Inside. Are people too scared to speak out?
Yes, I think, as I said, I've been stifled from the very beginning. I have raised my concerns on a number of occasions, okay? Let me just say that. And there are others along with me. I think the stifling is what I'm concerned about, which means that we have not actually provided value to the taxpayer for the salaries that we've received in the last 6 months. Because when we provide the best advice, the independent, forthright advice, it's up to the politicians to make their decisions, and we respect that. But when there is not even that advice available, or something that's, if my bosses, my executives cannot explain to me the logic behind different things, if the chief health officer cannot explain to me why a mask is needed outside in the open air where there's nothing happening, while I actually am a mask fanatic and I wear it inside the shops and I've worn it since February, when the justification is not provided and proportionality is not there, then the legitimacy of the government itself fails. And I think as a citizen, we draw a line. I'm happy to serve a government that is following the best interests of the citizens. But the moment I think those interests have not been served, then I myself am a citizen. And I assert my right, which I've done in this case, to come out and demand, Dan, that I need you to follow your own rules, your own guide to regulation.
Well, Sanjeev, I think you're incredibly brave. I think you're incredibly honourable. And I ask that you keep that voice nice and loud and strong and clear, because I think not just Victorians, I think Australians watching tonight will take heart to find that there is someone like you at the centre of our public life. All the very best. 18 years in the public service. You don't leave the public service lightly. Thank you very much for your time and your honesty.
Thank you, Pina.